Thank you for listening to Mobility Redefined, brought to you by Modaxo. For more insights and information, please visit mobilityredefined.com. That is mobilityredefined.com.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So, welcome to the Mobility Redefined CEO Roundtable, taking place at UITP Global Public Transport Summit here in Hamburg. So we are very pleased to welcome everyone to the Modaxo booth. So I'm just trying to see if the location of my microphone is right enough or not. I'm looking at my boss to tell me. So is it okay now? Is it good? Okay, perfect. So apologies for our neighbors for next 45 minutes for some sound, but you can always join us for this roundtable. I'm very pleased to be joined by 4 very high-level speakers and experts and leaders from different countries over the world joining me for this afternoon session. What are we going to discuss at this afternoon session? We will be discussing about how to redefine, how to reapproach the sustainability in mobility. It's the main discussion. Many years we were approaching the sustainability from the environmental perspective, but today we will talk about environment, but it won't be only about environment. We will be talking also about the stuff. We will be talking about the funding and resilience from different perspectives. We will be talking during next 45 minutes. And I won't be spending so much time to go into the details of this panel, but just a little reminder, you can enjoy wine and cheese during this session. It's being offered by one of Modaxo companies, Binary, brought from Italy. So enjoy your wine and cheese, except from the speakers. It will be served for them after the session. Show your water, please. So I am accompanied by 4 distinguished speakers. On my next, I have Ulf, CEO of Leipzig Verkehrsbetrieb, if I pronounce correctly. Ulf? Right, yeah. Perfect. And I have Dalene, Executive Director of City of Cape Town. I have Tom, who is General Manager of Dockland Light Layer from Transport for London. And I have Vesa, who is Executive Director of Helsinki HSL. And before I start, these panels are being organized in collaboration with EBRD, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and GIZ Germany. So just to thank to our panel partners as well. I will be having some questions to our participants while we are discussing, and we will be asking you to answer these questions in 3 minutes if possible, but it's good in case you have some additional points at the next rounds. And I want to start with Ulf because we are in Germany. And my first question is around the combined mobility, the shared mobility, because I know that in Leipzig, you have developed in recent years a very good program in terms of shifting the riders of private cars to the sustainable mobility with deploying more and more on-demand mobility. How this work and what are the results, Ulf?
Thank you. Very good question. Shared mobility on-demand services are neither a wishing well nor a magic potion to save us from all our pains. But as a part of integrated planning, it helps us as a kind of applied digital tools, applied AI to bring us closer to the customers, to help us with our 3 strategic goals: winning more customers, innovate for higher productivity, and so just find a way to sustainable finance, because it's the mixture of productivity and market revenues which will help us in the future.
That's perfect. We are talking a lot about shifting from private cars to the sustainable mobility, but also there's a discussion a lot about shifting from diesel to the electric. And from here, I want to ask to the Vesa, because there is an interesting target in Helsinki that they are aiming to have 50% of bus trips by electric by end of this year. So Vesa, where are you with this target and how you are planning to achieve this ambitious target?
So this target is already practically achieved at this point. So we will be aiming at getting by 2028 70% of our bus fleet already electric. And looking at what enabled it, I have been only with Helsinki Regional Transport for 1 year so far, so I cannot take the credit for this. But the Helsinki colleagues were forerunners in adopting EVs, and at that point the technology wasn't so mature towards in 2015, 16, 17, and they paid the innovation tolls, if you call it, would call it. But we are, I think, among the third fastest adopters of EV vehicles in Europe. And I think one key to success is that the market matured, and now the market players, when we are requiring low emissions, they are providing EVs also because of financial reasons. The life cycle cost ends up being 10% cheaper. And if you're asking for enablers, actually cheap energy is pivotal. And we are one of the few countries in Europe that has been building nuclear power in the last years. We just launched one factory. So you need to have both the stable energy and then the seasonal green renewable energy. So I think that's why we are a very attractive country also to invest in other green transition currently. But we can have the EVs also running in a cheap way.
That's great to hear, this ambitious plan, and which was already achieved almost. And let's see how it will move for the next years. But I have one question here, question mark in my mind, is there is a global concern about decarbonization in recent years. And I want to ask to Tom here, how do you see this from the perspective of London? Is it slowing down, this ambition on decarbonization, Tom?
I don't think it's slowing down in London. I think I'll give you some facts in a second. I definitely think there's a change in some of the language that's used around the world, and in some places some open hostility towards decarbonising. I serve at the pleasure of the Mayor of London, and the Mayor of London is very clear and committed on decarbonisation, and TfL, I'm very proud of the fact that TfL is also that. I think there's some lessons to learn that don't mean we have to change some of what we're doing, but we have to drive it in a different way. So we're doing loads of good stuff. We're not as far as you, but we've got 2,000 electric buses out of a fleet of 7,500. We are going out for a power purchase agreement to make sure we're getting energy in that's being specifically procured for London to use. So a real positive for us. We've also got a corporate environment plan that's really clear and focused on what needs to happen, but it's not inputs based, it's outcomes. It's what we need to achieve. So it leaves lots of space for innovation in the supply chain. So that's already good stuff, I think. But I think, as I say, we need to change the way we talk about some of this. If we say this intervention has reduced CO2 by 3.4 kilotons CO2 equivalent, I think a lot of people go, what? That doesn't speak to people. If we say we've made your high street safer, we've made it less polluted, we're not importing oil from countries that sometimes aren't always the most reliable ally, but we're making it in the UK, well, that's starting to talk a language that people can get on board with. So I think it doesn't change what we're doing, but I think we can talk about it in a way that is more universally acceptable and builds that consensus. But I think we're very much committed, and if anything, we're accelerating what we're doing in London.
I think it's very great. And when we were talking, with Tom recently, we were also discussing that electrification or decarbonization is not about just the technology. It's not about just the vehicles or equipments. It's very much about the people itself also. And I want to ask to Dalene here, beyond infrastructure, sustainability is about people. How are you building the capacity of the people with you considering your electric bus transition in Cape Town?
Yes, I feel like the poor cousin here. We are only basically starting our process now. We're building the infrastructure. So I just want to give that little bit of background. And originally the infrastructure was built for diesel, but when I took over as executive director, I said, no ways, we're now going electric. We're now going to start with our green project. So at this stage, the two depots are being refurbished to actually be completely electric, both of them. And then secondly, we've just awarded our first tender for only 70, sorry, of lot like the thousands, but for 70, but you have to start somewhere. For us, the biggest thing is that we have, and that is actually very different from European countries as well as US, etc., is that we don't have too little people to work, we've got too much people. So just put your hand up if I can export some of them to you. But the thing is, we have to now train them and retrain them to become electrical people instead of being mechanics, instead of being just looking at the vehicles, gearboxes, things like that. And it's actually very exciting. We have a private company, Golden Arrow Bus Services, also in Cape Town, and they have their first delivery of their first 50 buses already. They've got an academy where they also train then the bus drivers in terms of how to drive an electric bus, because it's quite different as well. And we will be using them. They're very close partners of us to also then train them differently. And so it's a whole process. As we have a big paratransit group, which we call the minibus taxi industry. And our legislation requires that they are part of the BRT system. So they must be transformed as part and be shareholders in the BRT system. And it is quite something to actually for them to understand the going over to electric. Why not diesel? It's much easier. It's much, in their minds, it's much cheaper. But although due to the import tax on vehicles in South Africa, electrical buses are much more expensive to buy. But in the long term, in terms of the operating cost, it's much less. And so we are also teaching them about it and actually also trying to get them to convert their vehicles to electric vehicles.
I think when we talk about the decarbonisation, we can all agree that the bus transport is one of the most important ones, because bus transport is responsible for 83% of the public transport trips in our cities. So it's the main mode that the people are using to travel in our cities. And I think your question, Dalene, is giving me a good transition to the next round, because next round is mainly focusing on people. Next round is focusing on the people in our industry. And I want to ask a question to our audience. Do you know how many people work for public transport in the world? Any idea that you may have? So let me tell, in this case, it's around 13 million people works globally for public transport. For aviation, it's around 12 million. Aviation sector, it's around 12 million workers. And it's not about because of the numbers, but because of the quality and importance. We are discussing a lot about stuff, and I would like to start the next round again with Ulf. So, Ulf, some of your Congress speeches earlier, you were highlighting employee engagement in tech adoption. So how do you involve your employees when introducing new technologies?
If I was talking about applied digital tools, applied AI, I'm very happy to hear you, Dalene, talking about training, because that's the core to me, to have like innovation islands, people who are motivated to innovate by themselves, and the younger people just explaining what they're doing, just training on the job is one part. Then cooperation with workers' councils and trade unions is another part. It's not always easy, but it won't work without. So what we did is we have our contracts with the unions, but we have an accord with our workers' councils, what we call laboratories for experiments, laboratories for new technologies, so people don't put their sorrow and their fear in front of innovation, but try to work with it in a secured area. So that's always step by step on the one hand side, and in the innovation islands with much more speed. If it comes to AI, we have some experts. If it comes to coding, we have some experts, and we have less experts because they are coding with AI. So that's speed, and we try to work with our workers' councils as well, just as cooperative as we can.
In some cities, we are talking about the engagement of the workforce. On the other hand, we are talking a lot nowadays about the robotics. So I was in Japan recently, I see in the stations some robots, or in Singapore, some bus depots are fully without people. And Tom, this question goes to you. How do you see the balance between workforce and the automation for the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the real question is, what problem are we trying to solve? So in Japan, you've got an aging population, and it's very hard, and a very strong principle against immigration, culturally and historically. So it's very hard to fill jobs working at stations, working as cleaners, working as bus drivers. So they have turned to robotics. Now, like Dalene, we don't really have that problem in the UK at the moment. Maybe we'll get there, who knows, but we don't have it today. So what problem are we trying to solve? I like that on the railway I run, there's a member of staff. There are none at the stations, but every train has someone on it. They make sure it's safe, They check tickets, they give advice to customers. They are a human face. And I don't know if you've ever called up any company to speak to them, but if you got stuck on a queuing system where it was trying to direct your call based upon what you said, you probably hated yourself at that point. And if a company makes you feel that way, that's not a great sign. So to me, like, again, what problem are we trying to solve? When we look at the maintenance side, there are plenty of jobs that are quite dangerous and quite challenging and have been done in the same way for a long time. So I really agree with you. You say, well, that's a place that's ripe for saying, well, what could we do differently? Fantastic examples in Singapore of automated track checking trains. We're looking at doing that on vehicle, so having some of our trains do that themselves on the vehicle. Also, some great examples of using image recognition or barriers for security. Singapore has that as well, but so does Budapest on its Line 3 metro. So again, we're looking at, can we do that? That's somewhere where it could actually provide a specific benefit for people. But just taking people out because we could take people out doesn't necessarily mean it provides the best service for customers. So we're always looking at what's the thing we're trying to deliver, what's the problem, and can this help us do it?
I think we have also somehow like a dilemma here, because I remember around 10, 15 years ago, I was advisor to city of Johannesburg, and one of the main objectives at this time was linking job creation with the public transport. And Dalene, the question goes to you. With considering this robotics and automation, how do you see public transport also from the perspective of creating some social inclusion and meeting some equity goals and employment and so on?
First of all, I think I must start off to say that we're not ready for robotics. Definitely not. I did sketch in our pre-meeting a bit to you in the industry that I work with every day, the minibus taxi industry, and that is, although they are regulated, there's a lot of illegal operators, but even the regulated and the licensed operators, it is a gangster area. I actually sometimes say that it's, for me as a person, it's very sad that I become desensitized if somebody is killed. One of the bosses are killed because I've met with him yesterday. Today he's killed. Somebody else I must meet with tomorrow. So to robotics, bringing that skills into South Africa at this stage, I don't think that we are ready for it at all. My biggest fear is that somebody decides to bring an automated vehicle into the country, and I promise you within 5 minutes it will be petrol bombed or shot or something will happen to it, but it will not move. But what we are doing a lot is in the project that we are building now, the MyCity BRT Phase 2A, we're very involved with the community and bringing them on board into the projects. And we are actually expending a lot of the funding that we are using during the construction to actually get people educated in terms of what is public transport, how do you use public transport. We go to schools, we support the local labor. All our contracts has got a provision that they must make use of local labor in this construction. It's a project we're very proud of. I've got a lot of numbers here, but the thing is that even there, you can't really look at automation of building. You do need absolutely the laborers on the ground to actually do the work. And we've got something that you call the construction mafia, which Cape Town has got an absolutely no-go policy with, so we refuse to actually bend to them. But our lives are being threatened because of it. But like I told you, no sport like transport. So automation is a very far away still for South Africa.
I agree what you say, especially from the South African perspective and many parts of the world, certainly. And I was listening one of the speech of the keynote speaker of exclusive breakfast organized by Modaxo tomorrow morning. And I took some notes from his speeches, and it was one interesting point what he was telling. He was telling that you can automate tools, but you can't automate the trust. So it was very interesting when I was taking my notes yesterday on his speeches. And this gives me a good segue to the Vesa, because after COVID-19, we saw the travel patterns are evolving and we see the ridership is decreasing in some cities and so on. And public transport authorities or operators in some places, they are losing the trust of the people. So what are you doing as HSL to get people on board again to ensure their loyalty to you and their trust to you as well?
Thank you. Excellent question. For us, we are still 10% lacking behind the pre-COVID numbers. So we have 1 million boardings every day in a region of 1.5 million people. To give you perspective. Yeah.
By the way, I wonder how is it with other cities if we make a quick poll? How is it in London if you compare with pre-COVID?
80 to 90%.
80 to 90% in London, in Cape Town?
In terms of the rail, 0%. But in terms of my city, which is the bus company that we are running, the BRT, is that we are way above our pre-COVID numbers. Although we have not been able to extend our fleet or anything, it is just through absolute good scheduling and sweating the vehicles. But yeah, we're over.
And Ulf, Leipzig?
110%.
Okay, so our average is around 100% in comparison. It's a good. Back to you, Vesa. Back to you, Vesa.
But the moving patterns of people actually change more permanently. So in our region of 1.5 million people, we have about 50% of knowledge workers and about 50% of the everyday working time, they work remotely. So from that you can calculate that the region has been growing and we have won the trust back, but their mobility patterns have changed. It's more the leisure time travels that have entered. You can see it also in the travel statistics that the peak hours have disappeared, or not totally disappeared, but they have become more flat. And we need to turn into customer centricity and do the actual data on what is the need for people to travel. And actually some of the products that we had, like ticket products, weren't sufficient for the knowledge workers who are doing hybrid work. We reintroduced, for example, the 10 times tickets for the remote workers or hybrid workers, and it became success immediately. So we need to go back to the data and actually start looking at what are the hidden needs of people for mobility. And we have some dark clouds also from the perspective of electrification of private cars. Because when we analyzed with all the high performance rails that we are introducing over the next 15 years, we could only match the growth of the region, and the use of cars increased by 1/3. So the region was increasing by 25%, use of cars 33%. And that's before we get the autonomous vehicles running empty on the streets. So actually, if it's about the ease of travel, the speed of travel, and the cost of travel, we have to become a lot better in understanding every individual's needs for travel. And I believe in the future we will become a lot more data-driven. I have IT background. I came from outside of industry. So actually, we have 80% of our people already using our apps, and we are underutilizing the data we are gathering. We are a trusted land of registries, like people trust actually the officials to handle the data, but we are not really using it yet. But once we start using it, then we actually can connect people with different modes more reliably than private car to their destination. So there is the key. And running, of course, the efficiency. So on the supply side, we have the classical way of planning the routes in a static way. But I believe in the future we will become more dynamic. But now we are procuring everything in 7+3 year cycles. It creates it rather static. So we cannot actually start changing the supply based on the demand data that we see. So some things might be changing over the next years. I might leave also my handprint.
I think it's a very good point. You are reflecting to the multiple areas. Technology, also for the procurement, a very important point to reflect for the resilience in our sector. And your points are giving me an opportunity also for announcing our tomorrow's session. We are hosting another CEO Roundtable, 3:45 at afternoon tomorrow. So it's more focusing on technology, innovations and trends, where we will also deep dive in terms of the data and the technology. It can be very good to welcome you again at tomorrow afternoon. And my last round of the questions are starting around the funding. It's a topic very essential for all of us. Before COVID, when we are in Europe, when we discuss about the funding in public transport, we were saying cost coverage ratio for the buses are around 50%. Now, what we see from the different cities, it's even going down than how it was before COVID-19. And my question is, maybe we can start with Tom on this one. Here, the funding is a critical concern, certainly. And what does a resilient funding mix look like, as per you, Tom? Is there a silver bullet that every city can copy and implement?
I can make this really quick. No. I'll give you a little bit more. No, but I think there are some things that we can look at and share that work well. I'm a big fan of the idea that public transport is enduring, it is sustainable, but if people believe in it, if people perceive it to have value. And if you can build a consensus and a coalition around it, then it's better able to weather storms, to continue, than if it's seen as being highly political and for one party only. So I'll give you an example. We did a big capital project in 2008 to 2022. There was a big new railway called Crossrail when it was being built and now known as the Elizabeth line. For those who haven't seen it, it's a bit like an RER line in Paris. That was very expensive. That was about 20 billion euros. If that had all been funded by one bit, if it was all like regional funding or all national funding, that's very volatile because you only need one part of that to change political party or to have a financial crisis, and suddenly you can't sustain that. If it's a bit funded by fares and it's a bit funded by national government and it's a bit funded by property developers and a bit funded by additional tax and a bit funded by local government, which is exactly what we did do, then everyone's pound or dollar or rand or euro is leveraging lots of other people's pounds or dollars or rands or euros. And that's really effective then, because your incentive, if you contribute 20%, is not to withdraw that 20%, because if you withdraw it, the other people will withdraw their 80%. So you're getting way more resource for your investment. So that works for projects. I also believe it works for operations. The more different funding streams, not necessarily equal amounts, but the more different funding streams, the better. And we have in Transport for London, we have I'm rounding, but about 6 billion euros a year of fares revenue. But we're also getting about 3 billion euros through a somewhat complicated grant from central government. And I think, again, that's really constructive to have a balance between those two, not being all one way or all another, because it makes it much more resilient when pressure does come.
Tom, is it public data that you can share with us your cost coverage ratio for the buses, for example, in London?
Yeah, so our cost coverage on the buses varies a lot by route, hugely by route, but it'll be about between 60 and 70% as a network average.
How is it in Helsinki or Leipzig?
If you look at the network as its whole, tram and bus network, we started with 75%, but we're right down below 50 because we have this huge pricing decrease in the Deutschland ticket, a flat rate ticket, which is very cheap, and of course, we get subsidies for it, but it changed our ratio significantly. And if it comes to me, a customer, are people paying for quality and services. And we are reduced to focusing on people who have no alternative. That's a social part of our job. But if you are due to convince people with good quality, we have to talk about customers. It's not all social security, but it's attractive and good services. So I think we need a market share higher than 50% and the rest public subsidies. But if we are too passive on that way, it won't do the service no good.
Yeah. Ulf, when you are talking, let me continue with you, because Tom, when you were answering my question, you mentioned about the partnerships and coalitions, because there is a good example that you are doing in Leipzig with other cities, with Dresden and so on, called Sumo, in terms of collaborating with them, in terms of some procurement and so on to reduce your costs. What is this partnership and how it works and what are the results of this one?
Okay, but that's not the revenue side of funding, but it's the cost side where we do a lot about productivity and efficiency. And we learn so much from other cities in in Saxony. And in these days, we're working on a training program for drivers' efficiency, saving energy. And we're buying the software together. We're developing the training programs together with different cities. So that's efficient, yes.
Why I was talking also about the cost is, I remember a famous word from the former mayor of Bogota, Enrique Peñalosa, who was saying that the real cost of public transport is not about what you invest, it's about what it will cost you if you don't invest. So it was the main thinking when I was asking this question to you, and then maybe I can shift to Vesa here. So life cycle cost management is also very vital when we are considering our operations in public transport. And how is HSL applying this to ensure long-term sustainability in Helsinki?
That's a very hard question. In our case,
that's why I am here, by the way. Huh?
In our case, you could argue from a chief finance officer perspective that we have found the silver bullet. But from a public transport authority perspective, you could argue that we are in deep trouble with this. So for us, we actually include in our operations the infrastructure cost. So we have already 1/4 of HSL cost is infrastructure cost. And it's running in such a way that over 40 years life cycle, all of the original infrastructure investment runs through our system. But if the political decision makers forget this, they start thinking, oh my God, this becomes terribly expensive. But you don't build the infrastructure for the mobility simply. You're building it for the city development. You're getting value out of it back to the system. So thinking about the life cycle approach, you should take a holistic financial approach to the city development. Like we are talking about these sustainable urban mobility plans in EU level, where you need to think about where you are building different kind of housing and what kind of mobility system you're building. That composes a bigger financial and societal plan of benefits where you're investing. And of course, if you're investing in an empty field, you can expect that you get the ticketing income at a later stage. I actually live in such an area, so I have a personal first-hand experience having a metro subway station in the middle of nowhere. But then if you think from the total cost of ownership perspective, you can make decisions also as a PTA and as a procurer in a different way. Look at the whole life cycle cost, including energy and all the services and everything. And we don't always do that. So we have to be mindful of what we are buying and the life cycle aspect, because someday they will also need repair. And otherwise we end up in a situation we are all the time building new, and we find ourselves in a situation we cannot sustain the old. And right now our metro system is about the age of repair. And we call it making the simple model for decision makers of the problem we have at hand. I don't know the English phrase for it, but we are modeling the big issue in the system right now. So that's why I said that's a hard question and I don't have the exact answer.
Thank you, Vesa. I think your answer is quite inspiring and giving a lot of learning points for all our listeners. And my last question goes to Dalene, because when we talk about, let's say, costs or funding, we focus OPEX and the CAPEX mostly, but there is also the transition. When we talk about the transition, especially from, let's say, informal taxi sector to the organized transportation, and not from the perspective of funding only, but what should be the model that can be implemented in various countries when you do transition from informal, individually owned public transport operators to the more corporatized structures?
Okay, thank you very much. What we in Cape Town are doing, it's basically two models. The first model is where, according to our National Land Transport Act, our paratransit, where we want to implement BRT, paratransit operators must form part of the businesses that's running that. So at the moment, we've got 4 what we call vehicle operating companies, of which 3 are run by a previous paratransit owner. So they give up their licenses to become shareholders within the company, and then they run the BRT system. And then we've got one where it is a bus company that's running one of the routes as well. The second model that we have 2 pilots on the go at the moment, and it's really working very well. And we are encouraging this for a number of reasons. The first one is that we will want to organize it. Although they're supposed to have a legal operating license, we want to show them that they can run better, because the way that they run at the moment is that they wait until a vehicle are full and then they go off. The driver is not always the owner of the vehicle, so he doesn't get a salary. He has to first make up his salary and then the amount that the operator is expecting of him. In these 2 pilot projects, what we've done is that we've sat down with the 2 of the associations, and we help them to actually understand their business, understand the routes that they're running, understand the amount of vehicles they have, what it's costing them to actually run the way that they're currently running. And they all said to us, oops, we never knew our business. So what we did then is to actually use our experts within the department itself to assist them to schedule services so that they don't wait for passengers anymore. They take the passengers as soon as it's time. Secondly, that drivers don't just drive all the time, because some of them drive 14, 15 hours a day, and you can think how dangerous that is. So they have a normal working day now of 8 hours, and there's 2 shifts, and also they get a fixed income, pension fund and all medical and everything else that's go with that. And in one of the pilot projects at this stage already, we could show the operators, and they have. I actually have a video of them where they speak about it themselves. Is that they were able to, at this stage, write down 5 vehicles that they don't need, and so they took the oldest 5 and got rid of them, and they actually don't need them in future. So the whole idea is, as the other vehicles age, they will then buy new vehicles. So where they had 18 vehicles, they only need 13 vehicles. They saved on fuel because they now understand that they don't have to chase, they don't have to go through all of that. So the 2 pilot projects are very successful, and we really would like to roll it out to support not only the MyCity services but the rail services. There are also areas where you will always have to have long distance, because we've got areas that's up to 40 kilometers, and we are supporting them and educating at this stage to get their businesses to bigger vehicles, 24-seaters or 35-seaters. And just finally, the only difficulty at this stage is that as soon as we corporatize them and they're in a company, they have to pay tax, and they don't want to pay tax. It's a multi-billion rand industry who does not want to pay tax. But we'll get there one day.
Thank you, Dalene. I want to thank to all our panelists. Actually, it was a great discussion. We had an opportunity to discuss about various topics just in 45 minutes, by the way. We touched the technology, the people, transition, decarbonization, multiple aspects on-demand mobility. Many thanks to all of you who were joining us, and also many thanks to all our listeners. Just a quick announcement. If you are not yet subscribed to the Mobility Redefined, we have a monthly podcast that we are doing every month. You can just select Mobility Redefined from your favorite podcast app, and the recording of this roundtable will be available from there as well. Thanks to all our speakers, and just to invite the CEO of Modaxo, Mr. Bill Dalene, for handing over appreciation to our speakers. And maybe a round of applause for our speakers, please.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Mobility Redefined, brought to you by Modaxo. For more insights, visit our website at mobilityredefined.com or follow us on LinkedIn. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app to stay updated with our latest episodes. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed the conversation.